So, Derek Chauvin is guilty in the murder of George Floyd. Former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin was found guilty yesterday of all three charges against him in the killing of George Floyd. He was charged with second degree murder, third degree murder, and manslaughter. In about 2 months, 8 weeks, he will face sentencing. He faces up to 40 years in prison for second degree murder, 25 years for third degree murder, and 10 years for manslaughter. Wow. So if you add those numbers up, he faces from 10 to 75 years in jail. Wow. 75 years, man, a long time. What do I think his sentence will be? Let's see how old the guy is first. He's born 1976, born March 19th. He is 45 years old. So, that 40-year prison sentence alone, he'll be 85. Another 10, he'll be 95. Another 25, he'll be 115 if he lives to 115. I mean, he could, but I think he'll receive a sentence somewhere around 30 years. Maybe. I'm going to say no higher than 30 and no shorter than 20. I mean, if the prison sentence is shorter than 20, there's going to be riots. You know, he could receive a concurrent sentence, which means he'll serve the second degree and third degree murder and manslaughter charges at the same time, so he'll serve a maximum time of 40 years. Or it could be consecutive sentences, which means he'll be in jail for 75 years. But I don't know. Activists say now is a moment to keep moving forward in addressing racial injustice. My thoughts on the case: I thought he was going to get acquitted or the case will end in a mistrial. I'm shocked the jury came back with the verdict that soon. You know, I mean, to me, this case can go both ways. I can understand both ways. See, I thought the guy was going to get acquitted. To me, this guy was doing his job, but he was doing it incorrectly. I mean, Floyd was resisting arrest at first. And if you're resisting arrest, you know, the cops can use force on you, as bad as that sounds, but they can. I guess he just didn't use the appropriate amount of force. I mean, kneeling on a guy's neck for 9 minutes, I mean, that is not justifiable. He's already in handcuffs. But, you know, I thought maybe the jury would acquit him. Usually juries are reluctant to convict cops. They think cops are, you know, goody two-shoes. They do things right by the book. You know, they're superheroes, but maybe that's not the case anymore. I mean, 2 years ago, I predicted that Amber Geiger would be acquitted of the killing of Botham Jean, but that didn't happen. She was convicted and sentenced to 10 years in jail. So maybe Americans are changing on their point of views about policing. Maybe they're thinking that policing is not as perfect as they thought it was back in the day. I mean, now you can film policing. Unlike back in the 70s and 80s, it wasn't. You know, maybe they are starting to think that there's problems in policing. You know, policing is not perfect. You know, they're humans just like us. They make mistakes. There are some bad apples. Maybe that's what Americans are thinking today. Do I think we're a step closer to police reform? No. I think some changes are happening, but we're not going to get reform. I know Joe Biden said that he's going to start working on police reform, but that ain't going to happen. Look, I like Joe, but don't believe everything he says. Same thing with Kamala Harris. She's the former prosecutor. The reason why they're not going to do anything with police reform or change anything about the system is because they run the system. If you run the system, it's impossible to change it if you're a part of it. I don't think we're going anywhere. However, more cops have been convicted of killings in the past. So I think we are moving somewhere. But You know, don't know why it took us to this point in time. We should have been working on police accountability years ago. You know, we should be teaching de-escalation, teaching the public how to interact with police. Most people don't. Most people don't even know their rights in verbatim. Different states have different rules for evidence and trials. The federal rules of evidence, they weren't established like the 1980s or something like that. You know, they have general rules, then they have exceptions. Each state does their own thing. No consistency, no transparency. So, police reform, I think it's going to take several more years before we get there. Police departments and state governments, as well as the federal government, they need to reinforce the use of force continuum. And that applies how much force an officer can use on a person who is resisting arrest. But there's no really national standard on what that use of force continuum looks like. But that's my thoughts on the verdict. Sentencing comes out in a couple of months, as well as the trials for the other officers involved.